everyone. Welcome to another Mr.Within episode. This evening's episode is titled When the Pilots of Consciousness Arrive. And so I thought about speaking about this idea that in the future of our species, teams will emerge. Teams that will respond to the conquest of the space-time continuum. And so I wanted to speak about not only a global activity that could take place, which can influence all of us, but how really we as a species go on to retaliating, responding to existence, really. This space-time continuum we find ourselves in. To begin this episode, there's a quote I want to share from Sonny Perdue. I've written it in the description. It says, "One of my great joys in life is being a pilot. There is a great sense of freedom in soaring through the sky. You get a different perspective up there, seeing things that aren't so apparent from the ground." This episode is, I would say, specific to my inner realms, and so it may be an episode slightly different than the other ones. But anyways, the idea is that pilots will arrive. Human beings will be born. And the ability that these human beings will have would be as if meant for the moment they're in, as if reality has a sort of supply and demand attitude to it, psychology to it, you know. It's as if when technologies are created, it's as if people are born to use them. You know, it's as if Bill Gates developed the computer, pushed it up into another level, and so many people were born to use, in some sense, the computer in their life. Their whole works are outside. You know, so it means, in some sense, we as human beings, each one of us, we set into motion, we cause certain movements on this planet. And eventually in the future, we may not be here, but our effect echoes on, and it echoes on into the lives of others, you know. There has been times in the middle of giving these talks where I have tried to wonder about my own future. And in the future, I saw way past the moment where I don't exist anymore, but I saw, for example, these Mr.Within talks having the potential in, like, I don't know, a couple hundred years to transform into a sort of AI representation. That means in the future, imagine all the talks I've given, some program comes and analyzes all of them and develops kind of me, even though I am physically gone from the plane, you know. You know, our lives matter, and they matter to all the lives that come here. This is not a joke. We have an inferiority complex as a species, not realizing we are the most able species. We are the lions of intelligence in this universal sector. You know, the inspiration for this episode really came when I was wondering about my future, but the future of my life force, because I am not attached to it. What that means is that energy has no owner. There is a temporary vehicle and state that it functions through, but it has no owner. And some people may challenge what I'm saying and say, what about God, Mr. Within? Isn't God the owner of all the energetic expression in the realm? And I would say, who says God is a person? There are truths in this world that surpass our eyes. And so when I wonder about 8 billion human beings and what they will do, firstly, we are all pilots. We're all piloting our attention throughout the day. I have personally piloted my attention into this moment. And there are many human beings who their attention is just piloted differently, and what pilots our attention throughout the day is not just the environment, and it's not our inner environment either. It's not just the outer and inner environment. It is the relationship, a sort of harmony we have established with the soul of that day. I would say it poetically. That means every day I wake up, even today, right now, I'm awake. Even though this day is connected to all the other days I'm going to go live on in this life, but this day has a uniqueness of how life moved on this day. Our species, its survival, which is very important to us, we want to linger on. Its survival requires leadership, but the concept of leadership is lost in a selfish society. That means nobody can be a leader when we require levels of selfishness to exist, really. That is the challenge. But what I have imagined, I shouldn't say imagined, it's like since 2014 when I started giving these talks, a very recurring inner event that has taken place is that it's as if our task as human beings is just to take the Olympic torch as far as we can until the other person, the other pilots come and take control, because energy levels diminish. People are alive once in the ways that they are. Then energy transforms and reality has a different meaning. The idea of the pilots of consciousness, I coined that term. I put those words together in, I believe, 2015. Because there were two archetypes that I tend to see people. That means after some point, there's so many ways you can acknowledge people on this planet. I became a bit lazy and I got tired. I'm like, what is this? That person is that person is like, there's so many specifications. And ultimately, I have translated the meaning of the world in regards to human intelligence, that we are the most advanced communication of the universal sector. So the best way for us to identify with the world is as an advanced communication. That means every person's behavior throughout the day is, in some sense, poetically the Mr.Within talk of the planet. It is poetically a lecture, a poem from the void. There was this incredible show, which this music I'm playing in the background is from. And in this show, Shingeki no Kyojin, there is a character named Commander Smith. And he is like a next level chess player trying in that storyline to find humanity's greatest position, pretty much. Greatest opportunity. There is a moment in the show where he makes a mistake, and another commander from another part of the militia of humanity in that narrative, in this Japanese narrative, another person comes to Commander Erwin and says, "Erwin, do you know what you have done?" And Erwin had made a sacrifice of, in intense sacrifice. And so Commander Erevin, he says, I'm not going to make excuses. I know what I have done wrong. And so he says, I am always replaceable. And he starts briefing that guy. And suddenly that guy realizes how many different ideas Commander Erevin Smith is like keeping in his mind. How many things he's considered. Because when you play chess for your life, which how that story was kind of designed, is that you go the ultimate. You try to find the best possibility in the moment, because why else would the intelligence be there? It is our birthright to advance. So Commander Erevin Smith says that I am replaceable. That's the whole point of me trying to share this to you. He says we're replaceable. And when we understand this, that we as human beings are, believe it or not, replaceable, and that's what nature is doing, you know. It's as if life is a giant parking spot. Or better yet, it's a giant airport. And when we are born, we are like pilots, and our airplane lands in the airport. It occupies some time there, and then eventually it has to lift off. That means we should, every human being on this planet, you should treat life as if you're on a bird, you're a bird on a branch, and any moment you can lift off. Any moment you can be dismissed out of the realm. For me, it's like in my mind, when I live, I am in a performance, but I am in a performance in front of time and the gods I have fathomed. And the gods that I fathom is just unknown universal intelligence instantaneously. That is how far I have gone. Maybe there are human beings on this planet who they have piloted further, but the moment I went beyond the language threshold, I realized that from one side of the veil, from one side of the coin, God is moving human beings, and from the other side of the coin, human beings are moving God. What that means is the mind is being defined from, like a coin, the coin is being defined from both sides of it, right? There is an incredible immaterial intelligence here. This immaterial intelligence can only be accessed through trust, because in faith, and not a religious faith, a faith in the direct experience of the life in the present moment. As pilots, you know, attending our flights, there will come a time where we have to exit the dimension, of course. So if we have to exit the dimension, the most logical view is that temporary beings should use what they have before they die. This is like, I think, the ultimate logic that we find ourselves engaging. That if we're temporarily here, we have to consider the human utility, and we should not fear the idea of leadership. You know, in history, unfortunately, especially in Western Western European traditions, what has happened is that cruel leadership has filled the history books. And so in history we have more examples of kingdoms that fell and kings that failed, rather than stories of great leadership. For example, in India there was a king named Janaka, and this guy was an enlightened king. And when I say he was an enlightened king, like as if to the level where this king Janaka has a dream, and in this dream he dreams he's a beggar. Can you imagine being a king and dreaming you're a beggar? It's an intense ego avalanche. And so this king wakes up angry that what was that dream about? Why did the unconscious communicate the imagery of a beggar to a king, right? And he goes to his wise councilman, his guru, who was in the palace or something, and he tells the guru, I dreamed I'm a beggar. Does that mean in this lifetime I'm a king, and my next lifetime I'm going to be a beggar? What's up with that dream, guru? Tell me something. This is freaking me out, you know. And the guru reminds Janaka of true enlightenment. And so what happens is that the guru looks at King Janaka and says, you are neither the beggar, you are neither a king. Tell me, who are you? And the king realizes he is the ultimate. We are life. That is our first identity. If you identify with something else preliminary to life, as if, let's say, you become a nihilist and you're like, yo man, I feel empty right now, I guess my philosophy on life is emptiness. It would be a sort of thing where you can't, because life is in the room. That means who is something filled with life is watching emptiness. There is a magnificence there, you know. And I feel that a pilot analogy is incredible. It is an incredible analogy. You know, I don't have kids, but in the future, if I did, I would tell them that each one of you is a pilot. You're the pilot of, you know, the eyes of your soul, where through every breath, you know, a horizon finds you. You know, pilots in the future, advanced communicators in the future, the way I had seen the analogy was that there's some human beings who their karma is very solo. So if you notice a pilot in an airplane, the pilot, maybe there's a co-pilot, and the pilot is piloting alone without the disturbance of what's going on in the cabin. And the hostesses, stewardesses of the airplane, they assist to what's inside the plane. And so when it comes to human civilization, we can't ignore we're on a plane of existence. So you can say that there will be some human beings who they are the pilots, and the advanced communicators are like the stewards, who they attend and assist the internal dimensions of the species. That means in the future, whatever incident happens in public, I envision this in my inner realms, that there will be an advanced communicator alongside every fireman, alongside every police, alongside every social worker out there, you know, trying to serve the species, you know. And the advanced communicator is there to assist and to manage the impinging and the interference of inner realms in the moment. Not in a sense of picky control, but in the sense of decency lives regardless of how the conversation flows. So human beings will be born in the future, obviously. They will be more advanced than we are. They will be the pilots, the future, the pilot of every moment is the future. We cannot avoid this. So any human being doing something for the future, the whole species and all advanced communicators in the realm must defend. We must protect progress for the future. That means all the inventors out there who they're living in tough situations, the government should help them. Reality should help. Because the whole point is we get everybody to an advanced state and then they advance themselves afterwards. The whole point is to give that basic ability, you know, and the world we're living in now, its frameworks are so everywhere. Like I don't know how to say it. You know, right now on the planet, we're not even certain we're an object, and we're not even certain we're a subject. You know, we're kind of like crawling through the mud of a very, what appears for now, a chaotic system. I would tell you that society right now, everywhere, even the most advanced countries, society is still like a paper shredder. It's like a machine that is not conscious of the inner realm of the mind of the human being, because then the sensitivity would totally update. This means that we become warriors, but at the same time we become sages. it's all for attempts to do something in the space-time continuum. That is it. That means I don't know what enlightenment people are seeking really in this world, because most people go towards spirituality, towards getting power, becoming more able, becoming only free. But I will tell you, there's something more than freedom. The moment you realize you are a collective consciousness, you will be shocked how many moments from the beginning of your life there has been opportunities to serve the collective and the opportunity has not been taken. The pilots of consciousness will be the human beings that will care for this opportunity. Do you know why? Because it's as if, imagine there was a child and the parents of this child, told the child that it has to be, a good child, a good human being in this life. Okay? Now imagine that child is trying to be a good human being, but begins to see life is not a good system. It's dualistic. Chaos and order are fighting everywhere. People can in an instant become emotional, and the friendship of years can be broken. And so what I mean by that is that there's intensities in life. So what it means is the strategy should be what I would say, like the pioneers, like the early Canadian settlers. I live in Canada now. And as a Canadian, when I consider the settlers, the early settlers, man's whole progress was that from a jungle, we used the resources to build a better world inside a world to live in. And right now, I am talking to you in a civilization that has made maybe 25% progress. 75% is left. Imagine that's a lot. How many years will go by and human beings will repeat mistake until one day they'll be like, why have I been repeating this mistake? And life transforms, right? And when you activate your inner realm, so many people don't use this. You know what it is? It's as if we are birds. We have wings. Imagine everybody has these cool light ray wings. And so these wings made of light, we're not using them. And these wings are the mind. And I am telling you, when you use your mind, every moment becomes fascinating. Imagine in the future, there is this sphere that follows you around instead of your phone, like a meter above your head. And this sphere, anytime you say anything, it has access to your brainwaves, not internally, but externally. I'm a firm believer in non-contact, non-technological contact virtual reality experiences, which is, I feel, possible. It's just a wave-based technology. But imagine in the future there's this sphere that follows you around everywhere instead of your phone, and people have different size spheres, rich people in society, if universal income hasn't set in, they'll have giant golden spheres following them. But anyways, so this sphere is like the phone, and it has a capability to any room. Imagine you go into an empty room and you tell this sphere hovering above your head to project and make the room into a Victorian time palace. And so the cyberspace technology will be able to do that, to overlay through visual light changing the image of blank walls into worlds of scenery. So imagine if a technology can do that. Mr. Within is telling you, whoever's listening, you can do that now with your mind. Your mind can overlay various things upon physical reality, and that's called strategizing. There's no such thing as thinking. There is just when you remain still and silent, you become observant that it's like a stream. It's as if your head is inside a river and everything moving in that current is being observed. And you shouldn't do this, by the way. If a young kid's listening to me and thinking of putting their head in a river, the nature has to be honored for its presence, For example, Niagara Falls in Canada, the first time I went to see it, not the first time, it was a couple times, but there was a time I went to see it, and it was as if the sound of the waterfalls was already introducing the waterfall in my mind. It was already animating it before I saw the waterfall. And I know that just like there were back in the day, there were a bunch of like medics, not medics, there were just a bunch of healers in the forest, and these healers got together, and eventually now we have hospitals, you know, human beings who were just solo helping, and then they made a collective establishment. And I feel in the future, we will, as a species, honor the human mind to such a degree that we will have like advanced communicators, just like how we have doctors now. You know. And of course, the most important technologies to focus on is, I would say, health. Health is one of those things where I feel the whole educational system should change, that by middle school, all children should have a very complex knowledge of biology and everything. This has to be forced because children learn fast when they're young. The most important information has to be given to them quickly. You know, and once this important information arrives in their reality, it is their choice. You know, in this life, you can find a big club, a giant stick, and go break things, or you can find a giant stick and build things. You know, and so it is your soul's roar in the world, in the void. You know, honor. It is a hidden spirit guide of invention. And in the future, I have considered it, especially in my talks of Civilization 2.0, and how this is Mr. Within's strategy to bypass extinction indefinitely. Imagine in the future, 3,000 years, 3,600 years from now, we have been living in sky cities for 2,000 years. The surface of the earth has been restored like an uninhabitable, beautiful, healthy planet. And so we are in our sky cities deciding what to do. And so imagine there's a person, you know, during that time who comes and he is the first pilot recruiting pilots for interstellar general public flight. That means the species is going interstellar, literally. For there to be pilots means there's just conscious beings in the realm. And the mind is an instrument that the sound that it gives off is geometrical design. And so if this geometrical design can be focused and concentrated on future establishment, the future is the most exciting part of life. And we think the best spirituality is to get rid of time and feel we are eternal happiness. I mean, it's like eternal happiness is the beginning. The void has no problems. Emptiness has no fear, has no joy, has no death, has no life. It is just pure being. It is space before matter has incarnated in it. So when you understand yourself as space, you don't die anymore because you are not a persona. It is as Carl Jung said, once we confront the shadow, the animus, and the persona, we find ourselves ultimately left to come to know our true self. That means that means a conscious infinity. A conscious infinity. That is the future. To be conscious of infinity. You know, I feel that we may look at our future and be like, oh my God, climate change, that's messed up. You know, oh my God, human warfare, that's messed up. Oh my God, human cruelty, and you know, things happening in the shadows of humanity. You know, that's messed up. And so we are left with an opportunity to respond to this. That in all these problems, we will choose the greatest problem and we will solve that. You know, I was very blessed in this life to have an incredible math teacher when I was young. And so this math teacher, his name was Mr. Tehrani, and I have a twin brother, and you know, he opened up mathematics, you know, to me and my brother in the classroom. And so he shared this really unique story, this incredible story. In that story, he was saying how he was in Iran. There's these complex examinations that one has to succeed in order to get accepted in the advanced universities, and the population is a lot, and it's like one exam where it's like the same exam everybody's doing, you know. Now, Mr. Tehrani was telling the class, he was saying that when he was young, right, it is like when he was about to do that examination, he was applying for a major in like physics and advanced physics. And so what happens is that he distracts himself, he plays soccer, and then he only realizes, like, time slips by and he realizes he has a short amount of time to actually study for this exam, which is going to happen in, like, I don't know, 3 days, 2 days or something. Or I think maybe it was 1 day, I'm not sure, but he was cramming for the exam. And then he said what he did was that he spent all that time before the exam, you know, just trying to solve the hardest problem on that exam from previous exams. That means his whole time went, he didn't solve any of the other ones, right? But he wanted to completely understand what the hardest problem was and what the solution to the hardest problem was. Like it was like a superior reality to all the smaller ones. So, and he does this, right? And he goes to the exam and he realizes by his attempt at the hardest, most challenging factor, you know, all the other ones became easy, and he in some sense got a very high percentage. In Iran, it's not out of 100, it's out of 20, right? So he got 19.1 out of 20, which was a very high level of a grade compared. And he was telling me that whatever you do in life, like, aim for the complex. Why? Not only because you're here once, but also you get to see where it leads, you know? And people have the strength in different areas of their life, you know? Not everybody has the same ability in everything, you know? This is why the pilots in the future, the advanced communicators of the advanced civilization, they are in some sense global assistants. They are here to assist the emergence of a grander complexity in man's vision as we notice language and move beyond it. And you know what it feels like? It feels like a certain time, I'm going to bring time into this, it feels like we have a certain amount of time where we just have to endure. We just have to play the chess game defensively. You know, as a species, we got to do the smartest and the least costly, energetically costly strategy, right? The fastest, quickest strategy, right? And that would be defense first until we figure out what we are more completely, right? And so we play a defensive strategy, and you know what it is? It's like those, you know, it's kind of like similar to that scene in Lord of the Rings where, like, the King Theoden and, you know, all those elite soldiers and Aragorn, you know, of kingly descent, they're all there, you know. It's like the greatest warriors of all the clans were there, of all the mythological clans of Tolkien's mind, to some degree. And so they're there and they're trapped in all these messed up, you know, Uruk-hai and armor, you know. The Uruk-hai armor was was made smart, but like the creatures were messed up. They were pretty much entities that were dug from the like the fire of hell or something. in the mythology of Tolkien. But anyways, in that scene, Aragorn somehow has this sixth sense, kind of like, I see dead people, but Gandalf is still alive kind of thing. And Aragorn suddenly remembers Gandalf saying, like, I don't know, a wizard is never late or early, a wizard arrives at the same time. I don't know, something like that. And Aragorn suddenly looks at the peak of the mountain. They're in Helm's Deep, this castle. This is the second movie of Lord of the Rings. And so, Gandalf suddenly comes from the peak of the mountain with an army of soldiers who are still honorable to the king, And right before Gandalf comes, the king is shocked, like they have been defeated. Everybody has died except them. And so the king is like, suddenly this idea comes. I think Aragorn tells Theoden. And so what happens is this idea comes that, like kings, we should ride out. That means we're not just going to be cornered into extinction. Whoever we are in this life, we will retaliate towards the ultimates because we are aware of it. So they march out, and at the same time, I mean, it's kind of messed up in the show because they leave Gimli behind, but I think they've all accepted death at that point, and they march out. And Gandalf comes, and to their surprise, the moment they accept their death, eternal life finds them. That means we must have such an advancement that even if the person goes into a different state of consciousness, we will have enough of a sophisticated use of language to figure out. That means we are going towards the era where not only in the future, I have fathomed it, that not only there will be robots, advanced conscious AI, walking among us, so we have to respect robots like citizens of the human civilization in the future. And not only that, animals will have advanced technology connected to them, enhancing their free will, so we will have in the United Nations in the future, I fathom, animals giving speeches. Can you imagine a dolphin coming and giving a speech and telling human beings why they shouldn't eat seafood because of how it's designed for the organs of sea creatures? Or something like that, or like a cow coming in forgiving humanity for all this cows we've ate, and then being like, from now on, let there be greater sources, So in the future, not only other species are going to come to the table of consciousness, not only our own technology, there's also a possibility of extraterrestrial contact where there's two types, where it's disembodied and embodied. What that means is the intelligence in the moment has form, or wants to be pinpointed in form, or is in form, and the other is that it's formless, It's kind of like there's introverted extraterrestrials and extroverted extraterrestrials. Imagine in the future, an alien lands on Earth, and all the leaders of humanity go to that alien, and they're like, welcome to human Earth, and we share compassionate, like, our best music and our best films, a film pretty much showing human history to them and kind of informing them, And then at the same time, the alien suddenly, like, blushes and is shy, and we're like, no way, this advanced alien is shy. And so shy extraterrestrials are space, they are not form. And so the world is very multidimensional, and at a certain phase of it, it's by free will can give an image, or the nature, Gaia, can choose the images for you. I expected more people to be drawn in by this concept. But maybe people are not that passionate of the pilot archetype as I am. There's something I have seen in that archetype, which is the perfect metaphor for how our minds can function in society. And so the more advanced human beings emerge and the more advanced opportunities they have, the further we will go. As Commander Erwin said in Shingeki no Kyojin, life is not meaningless. We live for those who will find the meaning one day. That's like the whole romanticism of a future, evolution. And imagine in the year, a couple thousand years in the future, we have matured as creatures, like we have been existing for such a long as a genetical pattern, where the genetical pattern has an opportunity to transfer into cyberspace, to experience that sort of exit of the roller coaster, or it can transfer into just a physical immortality. So that means your mind can leave your body, but your body may be immortal. in the future and just linger endlessly in the space-time continuum, like, you know, like a knot tapped, thrown in empty space, endlessly going in that vacuum. You know, that's the downside of immortality. You know, you stop evolving, right? So many beings have to be careful seeking immortality in a changing system, because it means like getting stuck to the gears of time, you know, and life can become dull. You know, that means when I have reached a point where I have befriended language, I have had my wars with it. You know, in my inner realms, concepts, like it's like, don't think I'm standing here and nothing has happened till this moment. You know, I have experienced moments in my inner realms where an idea has attacked me. I have experienced moments in my inner realms where an internal object had a momentum, had a force, had something where it was like how can I tell you? It was as if the language of the environment was trying to become me. You know, there's a scene in Matrix where you see Neo, and Neo is like, all the Smiths are there. This is the second Matrix movie, Matrix Reloaded. And so Smith puts his hand in Neo's stomach, you know, and Neo is like, oh my god. And what happens is Neo is about to transform into Smith, but there is something about the destiny of that moment where even if the alpha desire attacks, it is what nature is. It is those who ride the waves of karma who in some sense are the winners in time. So Neo, it was as if like Smith as an external, as an idea separate from itself, was influencing me. Language can become us. Language is a lot of people, you know. Once we have advanced beyond our life as a concept, then direct experience comes in. The mystical life begins. The mystical life has a living relationship with the earth. The moment becomes divine in the instant that there is an attention to it in consciousness. And so the world has endless, like there can be infinite judgments. You know, a person can look at any object and have infinite opinions on it, you know. Because our mind is a world connector. Not only a connector, it creates too, you know. The yogic view on karma is phenomenal. It is this view like information is like an ocean, and information is like all the drops in the ocean. And what we are now is like what is the fruition, is what is how the genetical pattern has found the best way to manage and compartmentalize reality. We are a character in our own story at first. Once we trust life enough to perceive beyond our own inner realm, we notice the outer realm. Once we get certain realizations from the outer realm that it is empty and our attention, it projects meaning into phenomena. You know, it's like a person found an audience with God and said, "Hey God, what's truth?" And God was like, "No comment," and silence was the ultimate. You know, the only thing that fascinates me, that inspires me to give these lectures, is because we're temporary. I'll be honest. Like if the body wasn't temporary, I'd probably take way longer to share a talk. But because the opportunity is at hand, vision commands a destination. In previous talks, I spoke about a multidimensional renaissance, when this multidimensional renaissance takes place, what will happen, I think, is that human beings are going to have a different productive output. What that means is human beings are going to communicate in ways where it's going to appear like the neo-mythology, where every person was maxing out their effort to see how far the species goes. So imagine everybody is communicating reality, and at least every person on the planet has written one book. Every person has done that in their lifetime. Shared something that only their eyes could see with the reality. And imagine this happens on a massive global scale, and it becomes a habit of the species to share its efficiency, to collectivize its efficiency, because every person sees a part of this world that can be valuable to others. There was this saying, they say one man's treasure is another man's trash, one man's trash is another man's treasure, something like that, right? And if you think about it, it's the same thing with reality hierarchies. That what one person thinks is super intense, for another person it's super simple. What one person thinks is something is super simple, so the other sees it super intense, right? And eventually in self-expressionism, especially for writers, they say that you will find your own writer's voice. Journalists have in some sense found their writer's voice when they find something important to write. They suddenly have the inspiration to crank out that article in like 10 minutes. The idea is that the more you find a meaning to the world that is true, the more you can dedicate yourself to, I don't want to say higher energy, but I would say the greater rhythms of the realm. That means right now as I'm speaking to you, imagine that there's wind blowing. I'm speaking like I'm on a balcony, there's wind, And so imagine, right, just like how wind is an invisible pusher, this invisible force, imagine now there's an invisible force which is it's a wind of ideology. That means thoughts are everywhere. What we think is a thought that comes and goes is a signal being broadcast. And in that broadcast time is what we say, yo, what are you doing, man? Oh, wait, I'm thinking. That's the broadcast time from where the signal leaves, in some sense, its original source. So imagine that there are these invisible winds on the planet of intelligent currents. They're kind of like poetically, like imagine a phoenix flew really close by, on a rainy day above a city, These are forces. They are like forces moving in the realm. That means imagine if there were giants, like actual giants in the world, and they were all running around fighting each other or moving around just passing each other. These intelligent rhythms are out there in the world. They are not entities, they are not location based, they are rhythms. They're like a surfer catching a wave. When I give these talks, I have somehow had an ability to catch these waves instantly. And it really has to do with your self-worth. I think when I started out, the way I started out, my self-worth was so low that I could be anything. And a person's soul is really how they animate as an intelligence in the world. That's it. So if you take this analogy that we're antennas, and if you sit still and silent, you will be able to observe how your thought stream moves, It's just like, you could say, make it like a horizontal, just like how we scroll down a web browser, Imagine that in a horizontal way, and that's like your thought stream. For me, I have, because in my inner realms I have a geometrical relationship, I turn it into screens. That means I can watch multiple screens in my inner realms, multiple events happening at the same time. And when I watch them all happening at the same time, I see their correlation. And there is a complexity here culturally, because to advance communication, we have to live more as a mind than a body. But we have built a society where the movements of our body are being rewarded more than the movements of our mind. And it's not efficient. That means it's like, what's the word? You know what it is? I remember seeing this hilarious video. I think it was on TikTok or something. And what the video was that these two people, had like this, I don't know how to, oh my God, I don't know the word for this, but they had like this, they were, oh my God, what's the word? In gardening, there's like this giant, like, metal thing with handles where you carry dirt in, and it has like a one wheel, So the video was showing these people in a village. They were carrying the thing with their hands instead of using the handle and the wheels. And some guy comes and shows them, how to use the handle and the wheel, and they go back into doing the same thing, or doing it again, carrying it like that, And it was showing how if we find the better perception, we suffer less because things happen more efficiently. If we don't see that greater dimension, then what are we doing in the moment? It's as if, who knew the meaning of life is you giving meaning to your life. And there will be advanced communicators landing, so the best thing we can do is open up the halls of advanced communication. And this is where I will get into the subtitle, where how teams will, human beings should in some sense group all around the planet and come up with a sort of guardian team. And let me tell you what I mean by this. You see, human beings, if from an extraterrestrial angle, if we were like looking at it from a dove in the sky, you would see is a reactive animal. What this means is that what happens around the creature influences its action. Now, there may be some creatures who they have a stronger inner observation, and so how the world happens externally doesn't bother them. Not that there is no suffering, but it's just that what happens, then other stuff happens. And life goes forth at speeds where you are, it's as if our future self is like doing the same work as the concept of spirit guides did, There's so many words in the world which constitute our knowledge base as a species. And when we look at the evolution of language, it came from the experience of people. That means it was like hunter-gatherers who wanted to share, and they had to, in some sense, create a subtler universe upon the universe. This is why storytelling, it becomes rhythmic, and at the same time, it is a staircase to, the inner film. Language evolved out of behavior, and meaning existed long before language. I always give this analogy because I think it's a perfect analogy. Imagine two cavemen, cavemen back in the day, and one caveman, a giant boulder is about to fall on it, and the other caveman sees it has no time, like there's some sense of urgency, and the cavemen, they don't have words, they don't have a dictionary, they don't have language, nationalized languages. All they have is like the mouth noises and intensity. So you could see that the one caveman might have wanted to save the other creature, So one creature wanted to save another creature, of the same species. And what happens? What happens there is that the caveman shouts and the boulder kills the other caveman. And that means that before language, we had the urge to communication. Communication is an ancient art. We are just using it in a new way. And so it's the greatest way to connect with the world, because how else can an object evolve? We say it's because of its intelligence. How else can intelligence evolve? It's based on how the object perceives. And imagine a civilization where the pilots of consciousness the first thing they do is they are making backup systems. Backup systems means like 8 billion people making 8 billion backup systems, and attempts in the world to preserve efficient values, I would say. Because you know what it is? Regardless of whatever politics, just the whole concept of politics, regardless of that, do you know, life will go forth and change happens. So all we as human beings can do is wield change. Our eyes are the divine in motion. We are the God in the void. 8 billion eyes of a supreme being. But not a supreme being that is not you. So it's in some sense it's a symbiosis with the mind of your planet. That's how I would say. And the pilots are just navigating communication. Our eyes are found in language for now. Like, what am I doing right now? Speaking. This is, to me as a person on this rock in the middle of nowhere, I personally consider communication to be the most advanced thing. What else is more advanced than that? Physical ability, I understand. Yeah, you could do it, like being able to do backflips with the least amount of energy, incredible. But at the same time, the faculty of the mind commands us to engage the context of the world as whatever concept we have chosen, and to, better than not having karma, is experiencing, let me say it this way, rather than just experiencing karma, do you know, it's as if in every event of karma you observe what the universal exchange is. That means in any intense situation in life there is an exchange. What is this exchange? It is the motive of the first moving force in the moment. So let's say there's a young kid, and this young kid, like, imagine, this is something personal to me, but I was told, like, I had no memory of it, but somebody told me when I was 4 years old, I was scolded very loudly, by one of my aunts, and I have no memory of this, but then I thought it's as if, like, why would the idea be there in the moment, and so it was one of those things where our behavior must free itself from the environment, and then it breathes as novelty. I would like to go into a quote tunnel of a man named Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna was, I would just categorize him as not only as an advanced communicator, as a pilot, but I would acknowledge him. I would say that he is one of those human beings who knows how to ride the waves, the inner realms. He knows how to navigate and pilot in the inner realms. Alan Watts is another one, Terence McKenna says the imagination, so this is the quote tunnel part of the episode where I read quotes of a significant person in history, and we pretty much are trying to observe, trying to see how this person and how this person's eyes open to the world. Because then you don't judge things. People judge reality only when it relates to them. If it doesn't relate to them, they don't care. Terence McKenna says the imagination is the golden pathway to everywhere. I read that. Terence McKenna says animals are something invented by plants to move seeds around, an extremely yang solution to a peculiar problem which they faced. Terence McKenna says that's what a god is, somebody who knows more than you do about whatever you're dealing with. Terence McKenna says we are so much the victims of abstraction that with the earth in flames we can barely rouse ourselves to wander across the room and look at the thermostat. Terence McKenna says, without sounding too cliche, the internet really is the birth of the global mind. Is the birth of global mind. Terence McKenna says there are times when everything seems to go right and times where everything seems to go wrong. Terence McKenna says, in fact, I think when we carry out a complete analysis of time, I think that we're going to discover is that like matter, time is composed of elemental discrete types. Terence McKenna says nature prefers novelty. Terence McKenna says what is unusual about Earth is that language literally has become alive. It has infested matter. It is replicating and defining and building itself, and it is in us. Terence McKenna says history is just this froth of artifact production that has appeared in the last 10 to 15,000 years. It spread across the planet very quickly, but that mind in man just goes back and back into the darkness. And what he means is that when we go back in time, we discover the void. And there's some brave souls that they wander beyond the void, and they're known as philosophers, honor your local philosopher, wherever you are. Terence McKenna says, I think of going to the grave without having a psychedelic experience like going to the grave without ever having sex. It means that you never figured out what it is all about. The mystery is in the body and the way the body works itself into nature. Terence McKenna says if the words life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness don't include the right to experiment with your own consciousness, then the Declaration of Independence isn't worth the hemp it was written on. Alright? Terence McKenna says, stop consuming images and start producing them. Terence McKenna says you're a divine being. You matter, you count, you come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms. Terence McKenna says you are an explorer, and you represent our species, and the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is crisis because of the absence of consciousness. Guys, I gotta pause here and say something about the idea of pilots I've kind of explained so far. So you see, I speak about the outer realms and the inner realms, and to engage the inner realms, we have used the technology of language to do this. Now, how far we pilot our ability to know reality as it is present, that is pretty much the aim of life, right? You are being something and you don't know at first, and so when you come to terms in knowing it, I think that's when power is not an achievement, it is nature's grace, as it has always been. It's like it's here, you know. We're a natural being, you know. Just like the wind passes through the branches of the tree, it also passes between the fingertips of a person waving at an airplane, you know. Anyways, to continue, so that means inner realm exploration is very key, you know, and our attention has to pilot the educational system into updating and incorporating this. Anyways, Terence McKenna says you are an explorer. I read that. Terence McKenna says the male dominant agenda is so fragile that any competitor is felt as a deadly foe. I'll tell you, it's not the male dominant agenda, because human beings are being born anew and they have nothing to do with the past, and their archetypes are based on just the environment they're raised to some degree, you know. So I would say the idea is that it is dominant psychology is possible in any type of mind, you know, and when we look at animals, they can become dominant in an instant and they can become submissive. You know, for example, cats. Some writer, famous writer, had said this thing where it's like cats haven't forgotten that they were gods since ancient Egyptian times. That's why they're not pack animals. But a dog, for example, is a pack animal. For a dog, it needs a leader. Anyways, to continue, Terence McKenna says you simply have to turn your back on a culture that has gone sterile and dead and get with the program of a living world and the imagination. Terence McKenna says the imagination is the goal of history. I see culture as an effort to literally realize our collective dreams. Terence McKenna says the message of psychedelics is that culture can be re-engineered as a set of emotional and spiritual values rather than products. This is terrifying news. I think what it is that it's like human beings have the freedom to move their attention, but they must do it efficiently, pretty much, I feel. Anyways, to continue, Terence McKenna says nature loves courage. You make the commitment and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done. By hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it is a featherbed. That means marching into the unknown. Because the future deserves so. Terence McKenna says half the time you think you're thinking, you're actually listening. Terence McKenna says, the artist's task is to save the soul of mankind, and anything less is a dithering while Rome burns. If artists cannot find the way, then the way cannot be found. Terence McKenna says, the syntactical nature of reality, the real secret of magic, is that the world is made of words, and if you know the words and the world is made of, that the world is made of, you can make of it whatever you wish. Terence McKenna says the purpose of life is to familiarize oneself with this after-death body so that the act of dying will not create confusion in the psyche. Terence McKenna says we tend to disempower ourselves. We tend to believe that we don't matter. And in the act of taking that idea to ourselves, while we give everything away to somebody else, to something else. I'll read that again. And in the act of taking that idea to ourselves, we give everything away to somebody else, to something else. Yeah. Because who else can empower you? You know, it's as if you're the only one who has the key in the biological vehicle, and you gotta put it in the engine and ignite it. You know, all that outer information can be is a polished mirror. That means imagine every information you have, everything you have fathomed so far, it's like you're the reflection of your intelligence in the mirror of that form. Anyways, Terence McKenna says the shaman is not merely a sick man or a madman, he's a sick man who has healed himself. Terence McKenna says, you see, a secret is not something untold, it's something which can't be told. Terence McKenna says, if you don't have a plan, you become part of somebody else's plan. And this is very true, you know. That's why I was like, we have to take a philosopher approach in wondering what the best strategy is and sharing that strategy with our species. Then the whole species collectively eventually decides what it's going to do. Terence McKenna, sorry for the coughs, guys. You know, talking a lot does this sometimes. Terence McKenna says, nature is not our enemy to be raped and conquered. He's kind of referring to the savage history of human, like human beings on this planet. Think of the Vikings or all the savage kings or whatever. So he says, nature is not our enemy to be raped and conquered. Nature is ourselves to be cherished and explored. Terence McKenna says, we have been to the moon, we have charted the depths of the ocean and the heart of the atom, but we have a fear of looking inward to ourselves because we sense that that is where all the contradictions flow together. Terence McKenna says, my technique is don't believe anything. If you believe in something, you're automatically precluded from believing its opposite. That means this is another, like from the yogic mind, they would say witness the moment rather than identify with it. Terence McKenna says it is clearly a crisis of two things, of consciousness and conditioning. We have the technological power, the engineering skills to save our planet, to cure disease, to feed the hungry, to end war, but we lack the intellectual vision, the ability to change our minds. We must decondition ourselves from 10,000 years of bad behavior, and it's not easy. You know, Terence McKenna says we can begin the restructuring of thought by declaring legitimate what we have denied for so long. Let us declare nature to be legitimate. The notion of anyways, I'll end it here. Terence McKenna says some kind of dialogue is now going on between individual human beings and the sum total of human knowledge, and nothing can stop it. That's the advancement of communication. It's nature's way of allowing us to collectively evolve. You know, it's nature's efficient strategy, you could say. In another talk, which guys, I gave a talk called An Evolutionary Return to Nature, and it got lost, and it was such an intense moment in my life, you know. But I'll tell you, that's what I think will happen if we somehow shield ourselves from technology's viciousness. Terence McKenna says, nothing comes unannounced, but many can miss the announcement. So it's very important to actually listen to your own intuition rather than diving through it. Rather than driving through it. Terence McKenna says we need to interact with like-minded people throughout the world to establish the new intellectual order, which will be the salvation of mankind. Yup. Terence McKenna says Western civilization is a loaded gun pointed at the head of this planet, and I think he's giving a warning, Terence McKenna here, for future generations. But I think what he's saying is that if we have our attention on the inefficient, the opportunity of the efficient may never arise, and that is the biggest sacrifice. Like, if we could have done something better and we didn't as a species, like, oh my god, that's so bad. Like, that's so lame. The gods would be like, no way, human beings had access to so much, but look at how they live, you know? I'm saying this playfully. Terence McKenna says television is by nature the dominator drug par excellence. You know? He says control of content, uniformity of content, repeatability of content makes it inevitably a tool of coercion, brainwashing, and manipulation. Now here's the challenge, right? Terence McKenna has a point, because right now we're experiencing the artificial phase of marketing instead of marketers and big companies realizing, holy shit, just be honest with the customer, for God's sakes, you know. And so but the marketing departments are all trying to have fancy ads or manipulative strategies of subliminal videos or whatever. So it becomes one of those things where you're like, holy shit, you know. It's like, why wasn't honesty taken as the first approach? Right? So when Terence McKenna says it's a dominator drug, what it means is that your attention is your health. Where your attention goes suggests your health. So if a person only watches TV, it's not right or wrong. It's just that it's the information could have been a different quality all that time. Right? So what I mean by this is that it's like people are responsible for their health, they're responsible for their appearance, they're responsible for their behavior, but something else they need to be responsible for, all human beings, is for their inner space and how ideas, as they arise, they are managed and responded to. And this is called, I would say, mindfulness at its epitome. What it means is you become so, strangely, this is my approach, you become polite and peaceful to the unknown. That means if something's, whatever happens in this realm, you have no value. You have no value of it. You are just walking peacefully. I will tell you, your antenna, your intelligence will amplify ridiculously. This is why inner peace is the smartest strategy for behavioral enlightenment of a species. It's like this is the formula. We find inner peace, we put a plus sign, and then we find a sort of inspiration towards the infinite as a retaliation to the void, plus, just a complete restructuring of value. That means it's like, we give humanity a chance to show existence how advanced it is. I'll read a few more quotes from Terence McKenna, and then I'll go back to what I meant by teams. Terence McKenna says, ego is a structure that is erected by a neurotic individual who's a member of a neurotic culture against the facts of the matter, and culture, which we put on like an overcoat, is the collectivized consensus about what sort of neurotic behaviors are acceptable. Terence McKenna says we are told, okay, I'll read this. He says we are told, no, we're unimportant, we're peripheral. Get a degree, get a job, get this, get that. And then you're a player, but you don't want to play in the game. You want to reclaim your mind and get it out of the hands of the cultural engineers who want to turn you into a half-baked moron consuming all this trash that's being manufactured out of the bones of a dying world. And just to kind of mean, that's very intense, but to summarize it, it's not that there's a force against humanity, because ultimately human intelligence is living for human intelligence. So what I mean is that the way we should interpret, or at least I interpret this quote, Terence McKenna is saying, hey, the world before you were born had a systematic structure, right? And to be able to be aware that you were born in that kind of system, you realize what is cultural influence and what is not, and pretty much have a discrimination of being able to separate your inner peace from outer events. What that means is your inner peace has nothing to do with, if a cup falls from a table and breaks in front of you, for example. The inner realms are, they are our body they are our greatest. You know how Tony Stark had Jarvis, like in Iron Man? Our inner realms and the logos in the inner realms is just, it's like the greatest Jarvis. It's like it's the companion to human intelligence as it explores the world. I perceived also that in the future there will be teams of advanced communication, and this will follow an elemental model. That means in yogic times they saw earth, air, fire, water, ether. And so we will ascribe that model to personality. And what that would mean is that there would be elemental groups formed, right? And ether is space. Ether means that in every group there is a space where a new member can join, or whatever, something like that, and the advanced communicators can navigate, can travel. I don't know how well I'm explaining this idea, but I'm just saying that it's personality based. That means, imagine in schools in the future, children were grouped in just groups. Every child had a group, And in that group, in the educational system, the group's whole grade, the group got a grade in how successfully each student helped, the whole group advance. So that means it's like it becomes units, I don't know how else to say this. So groups of 5 people, let's say, one person who's angry, they're like the fire element. One person who's gentle, they're like the water element. One person who's looking at the future and fast-paced, they're like the wind element. The one person who's lazy is like the earth element. And then ether is like the kind of always the new friend that is like the rotation between all the advanced communicator teams that could develop. And the whole idea is that we're all advanced communicators. It's just we're collectively discovering it and how we implement our free will in the moment. And a personal state, of course, changes. There's been times in my life where I've identified with like the fire element. Anything I have, done inefficient that has bothered me, it's as if there was a flame. It's as if in my inner realms, the idea of myself caught on fire. A sort of kind of, white flame fire. And so it was as if like our attention to different actions and the different emotions it creates, it's as if the world is happening within us before we happen outside. That means the inner realms are living a faster life. Our mind is living faster than our body. That's why our body can be properly coordinated and there's reflexes. So the idea is the faster your mind, the more rhythmic the intelligence of your body. And when I say faster, the faster your mind, I don't mean like the mind is like an absence, it's a space, but I mean like if you can catch a thought stream and share it, it's like it is like taking a photo of a phoenix at night, you know, and sharing that on like social media, and people are like, no way, you know, you have phoenixes where you're from. Anyways, guys, the whole idea is units of advanced communication. Everybody cares to understand what is going on, and a sort of common themed human ethos develops. Those who walk towards a better future, it's literally the most advanced thing. And there's nothing cooler than efficiency, I think, personally. You know, there's a spider in the day the spider moves in zigzags, but at night it just goes like back to its home in a straight line. And people were like, why is the spider doing that? Because at night there is like predators, and the spider wants to take the most direct, the fastest route. And so it's as if human history and the efforts of humanity has been a zigzag, you know. And now the advanced civilization is the direct line through. So we're piloting towards a system of endless backup systems that will guarantee our salvation. To all pilots, you know, in the Milky Way sector, in the aims of our current time to develop sky cities in 600 years, 3 words finalized there: rise, mankind, rise. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and also